Okay, we are live. Yet another Ask Us Anything session. Only the two of us, Scott and me. You know us, no need for introduction. Let's jump straight into the questions and you start typing over there. Otherwise, we go home. First come, first served. Anyway, what's next for after Kubernetes? For example, Cassie has spoken at NixCon about how to make the ecosystem better. I haven't heard that talk. I don't know if you, Scott, heard it, so I don't know exactly what he meant. Right now, I have no idea what comes next. Something will come. I just haven't heard any tangible experiments yet.
I'm not sure what will come after Kubernetes, and I'm not sure that something will really come after Kubernetes in the sense that I think we will use Kubernetes in a very different way than we are using Kubernetes today. Meaning, could I see, for example, WASM maybe picking up? I don't know yet, but maybe we'll see WASM instead of containers as a common runtime growing in Kubernetes with WASI runtime. We may see certain things that's where I think things are going to change. One of the most interesting projects I think that may have just been too early in its time or kind of lost focus was KCP, that I thought, took the idea of Kubernetes to that next level with just CRDs instead of running containers and whatever. I think the paradigm of Kubernetes is with us for the foreseeable future. I don't see it going away. What I see is how we treat Kubernetes going away in the relative, long term, but I think it will happen.
Yes. I mean, for good or bad, if the change happens, it will be somehow motivated by money invested in AI. Kind of that I'm 100% sure. Because simply all the money goes there. That's where the money goes. And
exactly.
I did speak with a couple of people kind of very prominent in Kubernetes, and I'm not going to name them, and they kind of worried that actually the next generation of people who might want to extend Kubernetes further, let's say for the sake of AI, might find it too daunting and too legacy and just say, okay, I don't want to deal with all this. Sometimes comes a moment when you say it's easier to start from scratch, and I feel that is equally valid in almost any software I've seen, and is likely to be valid in Kubernetes. Whether that's next year or 50 years from now, and I'm not alive anymore, that I don't know, right? But there is that complexity that just kind of keeps growing, and eventually it bursts.
It will. I think that because Kubernetes is probably the most widely adopted runtime in the world that we've ever had, really, in terms of its widespread adoption. The main challenge, and this is, by the way, why I think that WASM failed, or is failing not in the web browser, but it was the runtime or isn't succeeding like I hoped it would. The reason is because the value has to be so much better and so large to make it worthwhile for me to spend the effort in re-architecting for something. I still do not know what that big difference could be that would make it worthwhile for me for anyone to migrate off of Kubernetes to. Meaning there would have to be some major revelation that comes out there that would make it worthwhile to move, like there was to Kubernetes from the monoliths that we were at, right? People were already moving to Docker Swarm, to all these things. It was starting, but nothing had really happened. Kubernetes came at the right time, and Kubernetes won that war. For good or for bad, it won the war of, containerized orchestration tools. When the next big paradigm shift happens, that's when, if Kubernetes can't keep up, there will be an alternative.
Yeah. I mean, I don't see it happening anytime soon, but, I'm always, I don't want to exclude that option, because the moment you do that, then you stop.
Expect Kubernetes before Kubernetes came?
Exactly, or
No.
Exactly, and many others before that
Right.
and after, and so on and so forth. I mean,
Did
heck,
you
I
think
did
it
not.
was ever going to be something that would be as simple as GitHub Actions when you were working for companies that dealt with Jenkins by customers? No.
Yeah.
And also a new paradigm shift happened, and now you see huge migration to it, and or GitLab CI or any of these tools that are the similar UX as GitHub Actions, right?
Exactly. Same thing. Like I don't know, I was saying the same thing with Puppet, right? I mean, yeah, Chef came along, but that's the same thing, right? I did not contemplate that actually it will be completely gone, both of them, with whatever came afterwards. The major difference actually in favor of Kubernetes staying here for a very, very long time is that it's almost like Linux kind of. It's massive. It's you can replace Chef with Terraform, but the amount of work required to do that is very different than, let's say, Linux.
Yeah.
And just to change the subject, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so from T. Lindeza, if you had to implement a way to pause databases and services during weekends to save costs, how would you do it? Problematic part is to save cost, because my brain immediately interpreted, hey, use cloud providers already have some kind of serverless options that will scale down automatically, but they are not less expensive, so you wouldn't save money on them, right?
Right. Really, this depends on where you're running stuff. If you're running in Kubernetes, scale down the, pods, right? Whatever. Like, you can do a bunch of stuff there. If you're running on VMs, self-managed databases, which I hope you're not, but if you are, you can power off the VMs and not pay for the compute. If you're using RDS, you can't, right? That, again, this is one of those things.
Wait, you cannot shut down, you cannot stop RDS?
I don't think so. Not that I know of. I don't think you can stop RDS.
That sounds so silly.
But again,
from AWS.
It's where I think, again, but I think that's the same in Google Cloud SQL and Azure SQL. As far as I know, you can't shut down an instance. That is one of the things that's very common, though. You can't shut down an EKS control plane. You can delete it.
Fair enough.
You can't shut it down.
There
is a major difference, and this is very important. This is one of the trade-offs of a managed service versus when you own it yourself. When you own it yourself, you can optimize the hell out of it. You can power it down during off hours, repower it on, do whatever you want. When it's a managed service, your abilities are going to be less, but the amount of engineering power that you need and expertise you need is lower. So the TCO is a question of where the total cost of ownership is, which one is better, and it's going to depend on what skill set you have in a company, if you should be going with managed or not. In managed databases, I don't think you really have a solution. In self-managed, you definitely have solutions of scaling it down and things like that. The only option you have, if it's managed and the database isn't that large, would be doing a backup before the weekend, delete the database, recreate the database, whatever, and restore the data, right? Like, that's the only way that you could save money. If you're talking about terabytes of data, though, and petabytes of data even, good luck doing that, right? Like, so it's really going to be dependent on the use case.
There you go.
Sorry, there's no good answer.
Pure Havoc, how do you handle or detect infrastructure as called drifts of unmanaged resources? I don't have the answer. I don't. I would make them managed resources with whatever tool you're doing.
Well, no, how do you handle it, though? And I think that it's a difficult question, right? Like, how do you, there are many companies that have brownfield, right? You come into brownfield that didn't do everything through IAC. What do you do? How do you gain organization in that chaos? There are tools like Firefly, for example, that exist out there that can basically map your cloud accounts, and they look all over AWS and find the resources and look at your Terraform states and say, hey, these resources aren't managed, and they'll create, let's say, the Terraform plan or Pulumi or plane to make them into IAC.
But that's making them managed. right?
Making them managed, right? The question is how you make something managed. That you have a wild west out there. How are you going to figure out what you have and what's managed by IAC, what isn't? That's where tools like Firefly or things like that really can be beneficial. In terms of managing the drift of those resources, that's the whole point of IAC. You can't manage the drift if you don't have a separation between desired and actual state. So there is no way
even if you somehow could, it would not be worth the effort compared to bringing them into whatever you're using.
The only thing you could do in AWS is look at like CloudTrail logs for a resource, but how do you know what was desired and what wasn't?
Help me out. There is a project in CNCF, and my brain cannot remember the name, that allows you actually to detect all sorts of stuff. It's almost like a policy engine.
Cloud Custodian?
Cloud Custodian can help kind of in detecting, to begin with, what you have. Yeah.
Yes.
Not bringing them, kind of, but at least knowing what you have that is brownfield, and then trying to figure out how do you make them managed with something, whatever you chose.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, this time I put alarm on my, I don't know if you heard it ringing, so that I don't forget to mention the sponsor, Codefresh Learning. Go there and learn GitOps and use Victor, 50% off. Last week we had Kostis as a guest. He's person who wrote most of it. He's awesome. You should check it out. And learn about everything there is to learn about GitOps. I think that there are 3 different courses, kind of if you're a beginner, if you're somewhere in between, if you're an expert and you want to become even bigger expert. It's cool. I trust Kostis. He did a great job. Check it out. And thank you, Codefresh, for sponsoring this stream. And now let's go back. We need to bring Kostis again. No, next time, Scott had so much. You had so much better pitch than I do. Next time, Scott is going to promote it. There we go. From Miroslav, I'm just curious. We are as DevOps SRE platform where we should be strong with AI. Fine-tuning, RAG, agents. What do you think about NA10 or maybe alternatives? To begin with, I think that everybody should just start using it without thinking about creating their own stuff, like creating your own agents and models and stuff like that. Just kind of like get very, very familiar, because it requires certain skill to actually, at least in my case, I don't know what was your experience. But to begin with, I started very early, and then kind of I was disappointed, cool. But then later on you start and you say, this is not what I want it to be. Just as when you write the first line of code in your life and you say, this is not what I want it to be. But then with practice, it becomes very, very different, right? So just practice, right? Vibe coding, using agents and all that stuff. Later on, you might want to think about creating your own stuff. And my recommendation is don't do it. Don't try to create your own models unless you really, really have a big budget and you know what you're doing. Use existing models. Don't go straight into creating your own agents yourself, kind of coding them from scratch. Because you can get a long way just by instructing agents what to do, creating context for agents, connecting them with different MCPs and so on and so forth. I know people who got very disappointed, like, hey, I created my own agent and that agent sucks. It's not as good as Cloud Code. And kind of, yeah. It's not. Right? That same person went back and said, okay, let me try doing the same what I was doing by creating my own agent, by actually providing proper context to Claude. And I'm using Claude as example. And then kind of, okay, I'm done. It does what I needed to do, right? I think it's more important to focus, at least at the beginning, of use existing models, use existing agents, and figure out how to make them do what you want them to do rather than starting from scratch. And last thing, before I let Scott speak, I see he wants. I could never kind of get into N8N, probably because I haven't spent enough time, but it does not feel like something that is useful to me. So I don't know.
Yeah. What I was going to say on that is N8N, in my mind, is not for DevOps SRE platform engineering, who all know some scripting language, something, and they can write their stuff and write automations, and who are not scared of CI/CD pipelines because we're DevOps SRE or platform engineers. The N8N is a great tool, I think, for people that are non-technical, that need to kind of automate certain processes of theirs. It's great for that. So if you take, like, let's say a YouTube content creator that is not technical, right, who's not a DevOps person, great for you to be able to build the automation like what Victor has built in code or with AI or whatever for his YouTube publishing stuff for his videos and all of that. That's awesome in N8N because it gives you a GUI, a nice clicky, drag and drop. It's great for that. The issue with N8N, for example, is that it can't be done in a GitOps way. You can't like put your configuration in Git and have it sync in. It doesn't follow the practices that we as DevOps, SREs, platform engineers want to follow and should be following. And therefore, N8N is a great tool, just not for the personas that are mentioned here in the question.
I'm guessing that those are the same personas that could have been interested in low code, no code in the past.
Exactly.
Right, probably. Kind of HR, somebody in HR, or imagine marketing, kind of like, I'm not an engineer, right? I know enough, but I'm not an engineer. That sounds like a great tool for that person, right?
Exactly. Very similar to like Power Apps and things like that from Microsoft and whatever. It's all in that same world of the no code, low code, easy to create something that is beneficial for me. That's great, right? But the second you're in a technical position of DevOps, SRE, platform engineering, please use tools that are more relevant to us. Mostly I agree with Victor. You have to try things out with AI. Don't necessarily use it on your production code base yet. If you're just getting started, whatever, start a project on site and start testing it, start playing with it. Try out Copilot, try out Claude Code or Open Code, my favorite one, that's the SST Open Code, not the one from Charm that whole politics there, it doesn't matter. Try the SST Open Code. Try, different IDEs, different CLIs, different agents. Try them. Try different MCP servers. Don't be scared to try an MCP server. Maximum, you don't like it, it doesn't give you good results, you remove it from your MCP configuration and you move on to trying another one. Practice, test it out, try multiple models also. A lot of people get really angry and say AI isn't good because they were using a model that isn't right for what they are doing. Try out different models.
You can use, it might be, over time, I stopped using it because now I have strong opinions about specific models. But initially, I think Open Router is a very good option, kind of like just kind of connect whatever you're doing, get a subscription there. Don't get a subscription of Anthropic and then just kind of change. Like it, not like it.
Exactly. It's, for me, like when it comes to like chat, like one of my favorite apps is T3 Chat, which is awesome. Have you tested that out, Victor, at all? Or seen it?
The only short while. I'm actually using FAL. I don't know if you...
Okay. I don't know.
FAL. Mostly because it has, among other things, it has Imagine or whatever is the Google Imagine 4 outside US.
Okay. So like what's great in T3 Chat is that it's literally like you can choose from 30 different models basically. You just pay a subscription to them and then it's basically ChatGPT but on steroids with all of these different models and you switch between You want to try how DeepSeek responds to you versus Gemini versus the different OpenAI models versus Open Router models versus Olama versus whatever it is. You go there and you test it out, and it's great because you can also, they added like this comparison where you can have it run the same thing against 3 models and see the differences of the results, right? And figure out what works for you. Test it out. Don't be scared.
Okay, from Ep26. Hi, if I use GitOps to deploy workloads to my Kubernetes cluster, is it still important to back up Kubernetes resources in my cluster with Velero? Thanks. Very likely. That's my answer. Very likely. It depends. So if you have a deployment and service, that's it. Kind of, you don't need it. But if you ever something happens and you need to connect something to an existing external load balancer through ingress, you need backup.
Yeah. The second you have anything in your Kubernetes cluster that is using something outside of the cluster, that is, let's say, managing something outside of the cluster, be that a persistent volume creating a volume outside, a service of type load balancer that is creating an external load balancer, a cross-plane managed resource that is managing a resource in AWS, Google, Azure, Grafana, wherever it is, you need to use Velero. Because controllers in Kubernetes are saving runtime data that is important to it and saving state within Kubernetes, and you need to save that as well. It is very critical to have backups the second you touch anything outside of the cluster. If all you're doing is cluster IP, node port, whatever the deployment services, fine.
And
don't.
I'm yet to see a cluster that doesn't have anything from outside. I've met people who think that there is nothing from outside, and they're kind of like, and then you check the volumes, you're kind of like, come on.
Exactly. Right? Well, I don't have any persistent volumes in my apps. I only run stateless apps. Oh yeah, but you're running Grafana and Prometheus. You're running the Prometheus stack, and there are persistent volumes there for Grafana. Sorry, no, you are using persistent data. Now, maybe you don't care about that persistent data and it going away in case of a disaster, and that's fine. That's your decision. But
Grafana is actually a great example because I never met a person who, I know it's possible, but I never met a person who actually created all the graphs and dashboards programmatically. I never met them. You? Okay.
Yes.
Scott. There we go. He's an exception.
Well, hold on. I do not create them that way.
But you save them
in the UI. I save them as a JSON. I create them in a test environment, export the JSON, put it, and then through GitOps using either the Crossplane Grafana provider or usually just using the Grafana operator itself, which is actually really good. But use the Grafana operator to create dashboards, to do all of that. Yes, I always have my dashboards managed through GitOps. Even though, yes, I create them in UI because I'm not, insane and going to start writing XY axes and how stuff is supposed to look in JSON.
For a second, I thought that you are insane. For a second. Sorry.
I am, but just not to that extent.
Okay, this is going to be an easy one. Is there something like GitOps for infrastructure as code? Because if I'm not mistaken, you mostly use GitOps to sync up code into a cluster. Crossplane, cluster API, CRO. Just from the top of my head. All do. Go ahead.
There is GitOps in, for example, Terraform Cloud does follow all of the GitOps principles. It's pull-based. It has a consistent reconciliation loop. It's whatever. So the Terraform Cloud with SCM backend, with the source control management backend, so GitHub, GitLab, whatever, is GitOps. Now, it's not Argo CD, Flux CD, Cap Controller, or the one that I won't mention their name, from another company owned by a Linux distribution. But had to make it easy enough for people to understand who I'm not talking about. But it's actually a GitOps tool. Now, is it a good GitOps tool, a bad GitOps tool? It doesn't matter. It is a GitOps tool. And that's important to note, right? So there is GitOps even for Terraform. Is there open source? Not really for that, but there is in the
but it is.
Yeah.
Okay. I cannot pronounce your name. Sorry for that. Do you think Tecton may take out other CI/CD tools? No. Some, maybe. Maybe. Just maybe. Very unlikely, but it might take over, I don't know, Jenkins. But I cannot imagine a world in which Tecton has more users than GitHub Actions or GitLab. What's the GitLab name?
GitLab CI. Yeah.
GitLab CI.
Right. So my answer to this is that I have a very different answer today than I did, 2 years ago. 2 years ago, the answer was 100% is going to be the big one, and then GitHub Actions came
me too.
Right. And by the way, I am still a huge fan of Tecton. I love Tecton. And for companies that are deep in the Kubernetes ecosystem, awesome. And I think that it should be looked at. And by the way, it works together well with GitHub Actions. And you can have GitHub Actions for things outside and then run Tecton that runs in the cluster, which you have benefits of that. And GitHub Actions can trigger your Tecton, or Tecton triggers something in Git and then go and do stuff. So it's great. I love Tecton. But CI/CD needs to be made simple. We made it too complex in things like Jenkins with all of our groovy scripts and weird, abominations that we built. And having my CI/CD in my source control is huge. It is the huge benefit that GitHub Actions brings to the table. So, does Tecton have huge benefits? Yes. Do I love it? Yes. Do I think that it will become the de facto standard? No. Should it absolutely obliterate Argo workflows from the planet Earth? The answer is yes, because it is a much better solution in Kubernetes. But I think GitLab CI or GitHub Actions or Gitty Actions or whatever there is, unless you're using Bitbucket, and then you should use Tecton because their alternative is Bamboo. Right, in the Atlassian suite, but use the one in your Git provider by default, and then if you want it to run in Kubernetes, use Tecton is my kind of flow.
Yeah, the way I would like to describe it, more like if you have special requirements, right, that prevent you from using GitHub Actions. Really, it needs to be locked down. Nothing can go out of my data center, or very large scale. I want to optimize it, fine tune it, maybe. But otherwise,
or you want to run your tests in a cluster in your environment and need to be doing a bunch of tests against different microservices that are deployed, and you want to be able to access things through their cluster IPs locally and not start running a port forward session in here and then start looking at, whatever. It can be beneficial to have certain tests running in the cluster, I think for sure. And that's where a tool like that is beneficial. It just depends on what the tests are, what you're doing, if it's testing or if it's building. Right? Building, I don't think matters if it's there or in GitHub Actions. That should be in GitHub Actions. But testing, for example, there are a lot of cases where it's beneficial to be inside of the cluster itself.
Okay, next one. If I push wrong config into the repo, is it GitOps? Yes. Wait. It's not necessarily bigger oops than alternative.
It's way less of an oops because it's much easier to do git revert and be done. Just revert the commit and you're done. So it's git oops, but it's oops and not git
Exactly.
That's the difference. It's oops. Okay.
I've read stories, kind of, horror stories, how people push something to Git, and then that was propagated to all their servers and clusters and what's not, and that was a tragic scenario. And what I had in my mind, would it be really better if you did the same thing through by executing a script? It wouldn't.
And by the way, any company that makes an update and it automatically pushes out to 50 locations in the world to all of your data centers in production at once, Yeah, you
Deserves.
have a bit of an issue. They deserve the pain that comes from that. There is a company that took down half of the world because they did releases without testing their code. And
Is it three-letter company?
What?
Is it a three-letter company? Starts with A and ends with S?
No.
Okay.
It's a specific security company that has a agent that runs on Windows machines that took down like every.
That's the case. Okay. Yeah.
Yes. CrowdStrike, I think, was the name or whatever. Yeah, that took down basically the entire planet because they released code that basically blue screened every Windows computer that had it, and. Yeah, that's not a software practice. Staggered releases. Do blue, green. Do things in a progressive way. So, please, yeah.
Okay, Ari, how do you handle environment diffs between CI and local in environments like GitHub Actions, which often utilize prepackaged actions that can't necessarily be emulated locally? On a similar note, thoughts on Dagger. And I think that, at least in my case, there is a mistake in that question. It often utilizes prepackaged actions if you choose to do so, and you shouldn't. Right? Create scripts.
If you do, hold on. If you do, though, and I understand people that do, I do as well sometimes. If you do,
but you know how to reproduce that same behavior, right?
Hold on. There is a tool called Act. And Act allows you to run your GitHub workflows locally. And it basically knows how to pull in the actions and to run them in your local file system in Docker containers. It's not official from GitHub Actions or anything, but it's used by a lot of people in GitHub itself that I know that do this to test stuff. So Act is great if you're doing that, although I will agree with what Victor was saying. Use task file, use a make file, use a script, use something, and use the CI systems as the orchestrator above your tasks instead of having it where you define your tasks. Have your tasks defined in a automation that is agnostic and then move it around. I personally despise Dagger. I really do not understand it. It's just like I really hate Pulumi. I am sick of the idea that infrastructure is code or CI/CD is code or any of these things. Code is for application code, where that is the only way that I can convey the logic that is needed within code. I can't do that in YAML. I can't do that in a simple manifest in a declarative way. I can't do that with application code. For a CI pipeline, I am sorry, but if anyone tells me that for me to be able to review a PR on the change of the CI pipeline that's getting pushed to Git, it is easier for me to review changes in JavaScript code or Python code or whatever that my Dagger configuration is written in than it is for me to understand the difference in a YAML file. I will strongly disagree with you. Any human being can understand what GitHub Actions do or what a task file does. You can't do that with Dagger.
I will push back on that a little bit, or maybe we misunderstand now each other. But anyways, I agree with you for the orchestration part, not necessarily for the execution. So I actually encourage myself and others to create shell script, which I consider code just as well as Go, to create a bunch of scripts and just execute them there. So I do use code in GitHub Actions. I'm just not sure that actually there is a benefit of that code being, let's say, Go over shell. Assuming that we...
So I would say that shell is the one exemption that I would give that is legitimate to have, because anyone that is going to review a CI pipeline can read shell, and a shell script, I believe me and you can agree on this, Victor, a shell script should not be more than maximum 100 lines, and if you have more than 2 iterate for loops, if whatever nested within one another, stop. Right? Like they need to be simple. You can maybe have your pipeline run 50 scripts, and that's perfectly fine, one after the other. Do not put the logic of all 50 scripts into one script. You can have a script that calls those 50 scripts to have a...
That's the orchestration part.
Exactly. And that's where I'm saying it is easy to review a bash script that is running 5 commands in it. That is a flat, basically, task file. It's the same as a task file or a make file or anything like that. It's easy to understand. It's declarative. It is structured. It's ordered. It doesn't have loops and functions, and I'm going from here to here in 35,000 references, and then my review of code of a CI pipeline, it is not clear what my CI pipeline does to anyone that didn't write that code, or I have to start doing actual code reviews instead of just, oh, you're changing this to that. Okay, fine, done. Like, see you later.
On top of, and I agree with everything you said, right? On top of that, simply other languages used normally to create applications simply come with too much clutter for the simple task I want to execute those 7 commands, right? If I write the same thing that I would write in shell in Go, I would have probably like 5 lines for every single line in shell, right? Kind of, I don't know, this OS dot something something everything is an array instead of arguments, and then output it to error and check whether error is thrown, and then it's just too much work for no good reason, and then that increases the complexity of reviewing it. Let's say that everybody knows Go in my organization. It's still going to be complicated to review and understand what's going on because it's not designed for that.
Right. And it's not just that. With great power comes great responsibility. The issue is that when you give someone, hey, write your CI pipeline in Java /Groovy, let's say, write another JVM language, look at what happened. When you give someone, hey, here, write your pipeline in YAML, GitHub Actions, even the most complex GitHub Actions a human being can understand. Give me a medium complexity of a Jenkins pipeline, 99% of technical humans cannot understand for the life of them what in the world is going on there. General purpose languages make engineers do things in CI that should not be in CI. We cannot give general purpose languages as the way to do CI because that's how we go and create Jenkins 2.0. And that is a scary, scary future if we move there. I am literally scared of that. Very much so.
Okay. Ipos. Victor, I would like to see a video on Grafana and Loki in multi-tenant mode. Do you intend to do it? It's not on my short-term list, but I will add it. I cannot promise. No promises when. Just I will put it on my to-do list that already has 500 things. Maybe. Sorry if that's a disappointing answer. What do you guys think about the idea to have an automated workflow to troubleshoot Grafana alerts using an AI agent with the Grafana MCP server? The agent could query Loki logs, Prometheus metrics. I'm going to answer in a generic term without specific tools. I think that that's probably one of the areas where AI shines more than many others. Simply, hey, I have immense amount of data, go through it and tell me what matters. That's just a great use case. That's something that, we can discuss now whether I'm better off writing code with AI or without, but going through a huge amount of data, no doubt.
Yeah, it is great at parsing logs, at understanding what actually matters from a stack trace, and all of these things that humans just aren't, right? This is a great use case. Again, I have not tried the Grafana MCP server, any of that stuff. I don't know how good its tools are, if they are good, if they aren't good, if anything, on the specific tools at that level. I just haven't done that. But I would say this is definitely an area that AI will shine in, could shine in depending on the tools used.
Okay. Have you done Istio Canary upgrades? Anything we need to look out for, especially with Istio Gateway's current running workloads? What to look for? I guess I have nothing special apart from being very good at actually understanding your metrics before you dive into it, right? If you know how to distinguish good from bad based on metrics, forget about canary upgrades. Kind of like, I look at this data and I know whether it's good or bad, and I can confirm that over a period of time. Then I don't see anything special to look for.
Yeah, the only thing that I would say is something like Istio, which I say the same thing about a CNI, about any of these things that are in your data path, right? Always test it in a environment on the side with the same applications as much as you can deployed on it, and validate that upgrade does not affect you in a negative way, because Istio supports so many different things. You may be using a feature that has a bug all of a sudden in the new release, and you may be using something in your type of workload may be affected and whatever. And the second it's something that is so much in your data path, you have to be very careful, and you should for everything, but especially for things like this, test inside environments before you go to production.
Okay. Mention 5 problems you face on a daily basis as a platform SRE engineer. I would like to create an MVP for it. We are witnessing the birth of a new project, Scott.
5 problems we face on a daily basis. Bad documentation of projects. GA not meaning generally available, but rather meaning generally alpha from many vendors today.
I trust one project only because and I'm not going to name which one, only because they changed it to version 1. Too soon.
Yes.
Sorry, continue.
Let's see. Kubernetes is number 3. It's a problem. It's just a reality that we live in. And I love it, but it's a love-hate relationship, I would say. Another one is, and this is, I think, something that every platform / SRE engineer has a major problem with, is the ability to dumb down without making someone feel like you are dumbing down the information when you are talking to people of different personas. We are introverts as an industry in the platform engineering / DevOps / SRE world. In general, a lot of us are, and the ability to actually know how to communicate with the other personas within the organization, and actually, because you're the bridge, you are a bridge, and you have to understand that, and being able to deal with people, is a major problem. People are problems. That's why I love AI. I would say,
if you can get rid of them. Imagine if I could be the only person in a company. That would be so bloody amazing.
Exactly. And then you just deal with MCP servers, right? All day. You just deal with agents. It's exactly. It would be amazing.
And then when I yell at them, they don't get offended.
Right. Number 5 is DNS, because everything is DNS in the end, right? Everything fails because of NTP or DNS.
Okay, Tommy, what's your...
Victor?
My 5. My 5. I mean, it's definitely Kubernetes on the top of that list. Again, I love Kubernetes. I'm a Kubernetes person, but I would probably say that 90% of my headache comes from Kubernetes, right? And that does not mean that if I would not use Kubernetes, I would have less headache. Just to be clear, I would probably kill myself.
I would have more.
Yeah. So it's not trashing Kubernetes, but that's where most of the problems are, right? And I think that, it changed a lot since I was young. I feel that, early in my career, most of the problems were somehow tied to the code that we wrote, right? Now I feel that, code still creates problems, but now with Kubernetes especially, we externalized many of the things that would normally be in the code, right? So our code is now much leaner and much more focused on business logic and stuff like that. Things are outside, Kubernetes manages them, and so on and so forth. So it's definitely Kubernetes. Docs, I would probably put, I know I'm repeating yours, but you said all the same things. Docs is just, when I start contemplating idea to use a project that I haven't used before, if docs suck, I just leave it 15 minutes later. I don't want to deal with a project with horrible docs, unless there is a very clear indication that I should. Like a good example of the latter case would be, and Scott is going to love this, Backstage, right? I never went not nearly deep as you did, Scott, but that's at least in the past it was horrible documentation, right? But hey, I knew that I have to be in it, so I cannot abandon it like other projects. On the 6th attempt, first 5 times, yes. Okay, Tommy, what's your take on Rancher RKE2? I haven't used it in years.
Don't use it. That's my take.
Yeah, I decided that I'm not going to use it years ago. And I'm guessing that if it drastically changed, it would be RKE3. So I'm just assuming that it's still equally bad.
Yeah. So again, and we need to separate here. Rancher as a dashboard of your cluster visualization, all of that. Install it as a Helm chart. It's great. It's actually very nice as a dashboard. I personally prefer Headlamp now already. Headlamp has become really good. But Rancher, Headlamp, whatever, I think Rancher is a great dashboard above your cluster. Do not use Longhorn, do not use RKE2, do not use Fleet. I guess I did mention their GitOps tool. Do not use Harvester, right? Like, I don't like any of those tools from them. But the Rancher UI itself, I think, is very nice. I would not use it for fleet management of clusters. Personally, I don't like how they provision clusters, and they're completely non-standard just to check the box that we're using cluster API, usage of cluster API. But Rancher itself is a UI. That's the only part of Rancher I like, and I really do like it.
Same here. Okay, this is personally for you, Scott. Can you show your Hebrew script that is on your shirt?
The shirt, it says, the answer is right below it, but it says Hayada Chazaka, which is the strong arm, is the direct translation, but it's the name of a very famous book, a Jewish religious book from Maimonides.
Okay, I don't know whether you want another one. Personal question, Scott. Not that there was. Scott, do you live in Israel? If yes, could you share how was there in the last hard time?
Yeah, listen, I do live in Israel. I try to separate from technical talks and all of that. But yeah, it has been difficult. We're hoping for better days everywhere in the world, be it in Russia, Ukraine, be it here, be it anywhere, and all the challenges hoping around the world, hoping for, better days ahead of us and for safer times for everyone. I think I'll leave it at that there, but thank God I'm safe and my whole family is safe now. Yeah.
Ivan, does anybody use Copy? Yes, Scott does. Every day.
Yes. And many people use Cappy without knowing that they use Cappy because they use a certain provisioner of Kubernetes that is based on Cluster API. Right? So a lot of distributions, they EKS Anywhere, Google Anthos, VMware Tanzu, SpectroCloud, D2IQ, All of these companies, the NKP from Nutanix, all of these things are based on Cluster API. Platform 9 also, right? Like, and just the list keeps going on. So yes, Cluster API is heavily used. It is very good. It is the most suggested way of provisioning clusters in my mind, and it should be used in combination with Crossplane as that the mechanism to provision the cluster, and then Crossplane you create, and as part within a composition, Crossplane creates then a provider config resource for that cluster, and then you provision things into that cluster to create your baseline of what should be in that cluster, all as a single resource. Perfect way of doing it. Very well suggested. Yeah, it's awesome.
Okay, Yordis, any recommendation about setting up core components such as OpenBOW and GitOps with external secrets? Should I just use a VM or stick to Kubernetes for those as well, same cluster? I haven't used OpenBOW. Have you used it, Scott?
You know what OpenBOW is?
No.
Victor.
What is it? Is it Vault?
It's the open source fork of Vault. It's the open source fork of Vault. Now, the funny thing is which company did the fork? IBM.
Surprise.
Who owns Vault today? IBM. So they have the same code base. One is Apache 2 license, and the other isn't. It's just a funny little anecdote there. OpenBOW is part of the Linux Foundation, though. It's part of the Linux Foundation. It's MIT license, excuse me. That's why it's not CNCF. It's MIT because that's what everything under, Hashi was. In general, I would say use Vault and not OpenBOW. I'm not sure how active that community is, even though I like open source. But let's see, what was it here? Setting up the
Should I use a VM or stick to Kubernetes for those as well? Same cluster. I haven't installed. Yeah, Kubernetes. I'm just guessing. I haven't used it, but I will also say that if you're running in cloud, just don't bother. Use whichever option cloud gives you.
No. That's where I'll disagree. No? Use Vault.
Yeah.
Use Vault.
Always, huh?
Yes. My answer is always use the thing that is not going to tie me into a specific cloud and just works really well and has more capabilities than any of the cloud's offerings do. I always say to use Vault. Now, if you want to use a SaaS offering, use HCP Vault, use a managed service of Vault, use whatever. Those exist out there and they can be used and they are great. Right? But managing Vault is so easy for the simple use cases, and for the non-simple use, especially if you're in the cloud, because you have an auto unseal from AWS KMS and be done with it, and like everything is great. For the more advanced use cases, that's where Vault shines then way over the simple secret management tools that the clouds have. So I say always use Vault. I don't believe in the public cloud ones. But in any event, use external secrets operator, which can abstract that away.
Oh, yeah. Okay, are you ready? Wait until Jenkins 3.0. I hope not.
Hold on. What version is Jenkins right now?
I don't know. I'm not following.
Hold on,
anymore.
That's what I'm trying to see here, because there can't be version 3. It can't be just on version 3.0. That would be impossible. I'm looking right now at the changelog of Jenkins IO. Oh my God, we're still on. Hold on. We are now on version 2.516.
There you go.
How have there been 516 minor releases in a single major release? I have never seen that in the history of a product.
So that I can share some light. Basically, Jenkins creates a release for every change anybody makes. It's not grouping releases like monthly or whatever. So you make a change, if it's merged to main, it becomes a release.
Okay.
And it's also 100 years old.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Oh, now Scott, we're going to hear Scott scream. Yell at us. Do you think Linkerd is somehow better than ISTTO? I've implemented those two and really think Linkerd is so much lighter than ISTTO and also so much easier when dealing with traffic routing with SVCs. I'm gonna be short and then let you go crazy. I preferred the Linkerd in the past. I stopped preferring Linkerd a while ago when they rejected any idea of not using sidecar containers, and I'm not going to come back until that changes, if ever. That's my short version of it.
And I will make this short as well. I completely agree with Victor. Linkerd is stuck in the stone age of service meshes by believing that sidecars are the way forwards when they are not. The way of doing it is ambient mesh in ISTTO. I believe, by the way, okay, so if we went with classic mesh of ISTTO with sidecar containers Linkerd is better. But
yes,
no one should be using sidecar mode in ISTTO. That should be removed from planet Earth. Everyone should be using ambient mesh when using ISTTO. And the truth of the matter is that that the API of Linkerd versus ISTTO is a moot point and completely irrelevant in my mind, because everyone should be using, whether we like it or not, the API exactly as it is today, but should be using Gamma, Gateway API, Management Mesh APIs, or whatever. It's the standard API that Linkerd implements. ISTTO implements all of them do this. And just like Gateway API for Ingress, we have it for Service Mesh as well. And that is what you should be using. And that way, it shouldn't matter to you if you move from Linkerd to ISTTO to this to that, because it is transparent, basically, because you're using the same resource. We have the same API above everything, and it's standardized. That's how you should be doing stuff. And you should be using Cilium Service Mesh, because it doesn't have all the capabilities most service meshes, but if it has what you need and that's the CNI you're using, awesome, use it. Otherwise, use ISTTO service mesh, use anything that does not use sidecars. Stop with the sidecar approach. It's mute and not relevant for service meshes.
Apart from Terraform Cloud, is there any tool that can assist to provide controls to teams that are not familiar with Terraform to deploy resources with Terraform? I'm not using Terraform for years now. Professional issues with me, so I don't know. Are you aware of?
So for Terraform itself, Terraform, the answer is I don't believe so. For OpenTofu, the answer is there are many other tools out there, Zeros of the world, Spacelift, like there are many of these tools. TerraGrunt has some of the, I forgot what their thing is called also. But like there are many of these tools out there that exist that are based off of OpenTofu, though they used to be based off of Terraform, but with the license change, they all moved to using the open source fork, which is now a CNCF project, which is OpenTofu, which is backwards compatible, but since they've started to diverge and get different features. Yeah.
Okay, this one I don't understand. I don't know if you do, Scott. Docs, write a tool that creates PR following the Ataxis doc framework in a loop. That might be a comment to some previous question. Do you understand it? Well, no. Next. Sorry for that, Jordis. Is it fair to lose my brain cells trying to set up Tinkerbell for my Proxmox home lab? I don't use Proxmox. I have no idea.
No. I love Tinkerbell, by the way. It's a great solution for bare metal, cluster API, and things like that. But no, not for Proxmox Home Lab. If you're looking at anything in that area, I would actually look at Canonical Mass, which I think is better than Tinkerbell. Actually, for just like bare metal management, I would look at that as an option if you want to manage things in a easy way, and it also has a cluster API provider, but I would look at Canonical Mass over Tinkerbell personally.
And that's a wrap. I have a hard stop at the top of the hour, so no extensions this time. There are a couple of questions left unanswered. Come next week, be faster asking questions, and we'll help you out. Thank you everybody for joining. See you next week.
Thanks.